long time ago, I used to have an intro sequence on these videos that included words like unsolved mysteries and ancient civilizations in the random floating text, entirely as a parody of these irritating intro sequences. Well, guess what this video's about? Hello and welcome back to the Curiosity Mine Book Club. I recently stumbled upon a wonderful piece of science fiction online that I absolutely had to add to the Curiosity Mine Book Club list. This is Lightning Ridge, Spectre of the Black Opal by Pond, Roy Lester Pond. And this video will contain some spoilers, so here's a quick spoiler-free recommendation. You should read this for a number of reasons. It's fun, it's well structured, it's quite well researched, it's a who's who of local Lightning Ridge businesses and landmarks, and while it's not perfect, where it falls down in a way that's quaint and enjoyable, and that just adds to its appeal. If you're not into science fiction, then maybe this isn't for you. But if you're familiar with Lightning Ridge and opal mining and the local landscape and culture, then I think maybe you'll still get a kick out of it for a number of other reasons. It's also a very easy read. Roy Lester Pond is a student of ancient Egyptian history and has written a not insignificant number of fictional adventure books about ancient Egypt and its archaeology. Some of Pond's subject matter is pretty wild. He's certainly not afraid to mix his historical knowledge with a bit of science fiction and fantasy to create some compelling stories. If you're into archaeological fiction and ancient aliens and that sort of thing, they're fun. They're not very heavy. They could possibly fill a void in your life if you've run out of Dan Brown novels and you need something to satisfy your need for ancient mysteries and some outside-the-box science fiction and supernatural shenanigans. This is an online-only book that you can get for your e-reader. I found it on Uncle Jeff's massive jungle-themed online bookstore, but it's possible it's available through other sources as well. It doesn't appear to exist as a physical publication, which makes me sad, because I'd like to put it on a shelf when I'm done with it. It was published in 2021 in the midst of the COVID pandemic, so I assume this was one of myriad self-published books that came out during that period from a multitude of authors. The pandemic was certainly a positive opportunity for authors to get their work out to people digitally, and at a point where we were all gifted with a lot more spare time in which to read them. Okay, so spoilers ahoy. If you plan to read the book, you should probably go do that. I'll wait here. Okay. The story follows a young kid called Lloyd, or Loy Boy, who is mates with a local First Nations elder called Lightning Mal. Together, they meet up with an out-of-work actor and writer and his daughter, and a weird woman called Opal who the actor finds trapped in a hole. And together, they uncover fossil evidence that dinosaurs weren't at the top of the food chain at Lightning Ridge 100 million years ago. Lightning Mal's ancient stories of the Rainbow Man are true, and the Rainbow Man is just waiting to be found in a mineshaft that's about to be handed to one of our heroes. Throw in a bit of a conspiracy with the opal equivalent of lizard people and some superpowers for the kid who can see through the illusions to identify the imposters. It kind of reminds me a little bit of They Live. And then there's a few other diverse characters as well who have their own interpretations of the strange things that are happening. And it's actually a fairly well-rounded and regionalised version of an ancient alien story with all the tropes and all. The problem with fictional books that include bits and pieces of factual information in them is that unless you know the factual stuff already, it can be a bit difficult to tell the difference between a paragraph of well-researched background information and a paragraph of completely made-up material that facilitates the story. Authors like Michael Crichton and Dan Brown have this problem big time. Roy Lester Pond has absolutely done his local research for this book, and there are a number of great references to actual historic, paleontological and cultural concepts that he definitely picked up locally, but as this is not a reference book, the onus is on the reader to understand what they're looking at. For a couple of specific examples, the formation of opal and opalized fossils is explained with reasonable accuracy in this book, but the First Nations oral history is largely fictionalized to serve the story. I would suggest that you just read it as a book and do your own extended research after the fact if there's things that you want to learn more about. I don't know the story behind the creation of this book, but I'm going to speculate and assume that the author visited Lightning Ridge sometime prior to 2021 and visited all of the usual tourist stops and got the standard backstory on local history and opal mining. And I assume this because the information in the book doesn't really stray beyond what you would learn from a bus tour of Lightning Ridge. In fact, coach tours of the opal fields even get specifically called out in the book. Cleverly, all of the protagonists, except for Lightning Mal, the First Nations elder, are written as visitors to the town, so there's good context for this tourist level only immersion in the local culture. But it's pretty apparent that the author did not spend a huge amount of time in the town and probably didn't experience anything beyond coach tours and self-guided visits to local attractions. I doubt he had the opportunity to get to know local personalities or experience opal mining outside of tours and guides. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's always an author's tendency to write what they know, which is honestly a good policy. It does mean that there are a few moments throughout the story where local characters are a little bit more hung up on things that would only be relevant to tourists. But that's okay. So when I say the author did his research, here's a list of some of the local references I spotted while reading this book. It's honestly quite impressive. Here we go. The main character is called Lloyd. I can't help but wonder if this is a reference to Stuart Lloyd, the author of the Lightning Ridge book from 1967. Possibly a stretch though. The rainbow serpent, a component of local First Nations oral history about the formation of opal, gets a mention. Black Opal, capital of the world, is the wording from the sign on the left-hand side on the road on the way into town. The Australian Opal Centre, a world-class museum being built on the historic 3 Mile opal field. The AOC gets a few mentions, including a fun hypothetical scenario where Lloyd wonders what it would be like to take an opalized fossil of an ancient humanoid alien to the paleontologists at the Opal Centre for identification. The Opal Cave is a unique opal shop in Marilla Street built by Herman Kreller. The Gourmet Gecko Cafe is a coffee shop on Opal Street, living off-grid. Half of Lightning Ridge's population live off-grid in camps. More on camps in this video. Ratters, thieves who enter opal mines to steal opal. More on ratters in a moment. Lightning Claw is a huge meat-eating, megaraptorid theropod dinosaur that roamed the Lightning Ridge region 100 million years ago. More about Lightning Claw here. A reasonably good explanation of opal formation. Nobody's perfect, but this book actually does better than some. Opal on Mars is a thing. Watch this video for more about opal on Mars. Fossicking. We call fossicking specking at Lightning Ridge, and it's the art of finding opal on the surface of the ground or in the remnants of old diggings. More about specking here. Licking opal. Seriously, there's a mention of licking rough opal, which absolutely happens. A little bit of spit can make the colour in a rough knobby jump out at you. But the book also mentions licking fossils to help identify them. Apparently bones are more porous, and you can tell that with your tongue. There is some truth to this, but it's a lot more nuanced than just licking a rock and being certain about it. An opal field coach tour, complete with homemade jam, scones and tea. And the coach is a mini coach emblazoned with rainbows, 100% legit and extremely accurate. Halley's Comet is the largest single opal knobby to be pulled out of Lightning Ridge, found in 1986, weighs 1,982 carats, which is about 400 grams. Some sources keep saying it's about the size of a football, but that's way too big. In reality, it's more like a baseball. It's still a huge chunk of opal though.
You ever run into Halley's Comet?
The Leaning Tree Claim was a claim on the 3 Mile opal field where the Halley's Comet stone was found. Lunatic Hill is a huge open cut mine on the 3 Mile field, very close to the Leaning Tree Claim. The idea that opals are unlucky. This is nonsense because luck is a human superstition and opal is a rock. More about that in a minute. The Aurora Australis is a Lightning Ridge named opal that was found in 1938 and is allegedly worth about $1 million now. Anne of Geierstein is a novel by Sir Walter Scott that's largely responsible for the myth that opal is unlucky. Please tell me if I should do a video about that in the future. It's a very frustrating story and I'd love to dig into it more. Please drop a comment if it's worthwhile me sinking some time into doing the research for that one, because it's not a simple story. This is a very, very old copy of the book though. Amigo's Castle is an ironstone castle built single-handedly by one man, an example of Lightning Ridge's obsession with wacky off-grid architecture. The Astronomers' Monument is a concrete monument to the great astronomers of history built by a quirky Polish immigrant. I'd love to talk more about the Astronomers' Monument and its creator, Alex Spurlak, in a future video. Please remind me in the comments if that's something you'd like to see too. The Bottle House is a local museum in a house made entirely from bottles. The clue is in the title. Chambers of the Black Hand is an underground mine tour featuring both a historic mine and a labyrinth of ridiculously impressive sandstone carvings, including a replica of an ancient Egyptian burial chamber, which I'm sure was very appealing to the author of this book. The notion that wrapping opal in a bay leaf will make you turn invisible. Apparently this is a thing that people believe. Whoa! Please let me know if I should do a Mythbusters episode at some point in the future, because I feel like that claim really needs to have some science rubbed on it. Stanley, a giant steel emu made from car parts and steel that sits at the rest area a few kilometres from town. Stanley was designed by local artist John Murray. And speaking of, there's a local artist character in this book who I suspect is at least somewhat inspired by John Murray. I know this is a really big stretch, but in the novel, the artist creates an entire exhibition of paintings themed around opalescent unidentified flying objects, which is great fun because in the late 1980s, John Murray, the actual artist from Lightning Ridge, held a citrus fruit themed exhibition of paintings featuring unidentified flying oranges. I really doubt that the author went down that deeper rabbit hole in researching this artist character, but part of me really hopes that he did. Also, this is not the only book to feature a fictional character based on John Murray. The population sign. No one knows the population of Lightning Ridge. Check out this video for how that works, or how it doesn't work. Yabbies are freshwater crayfish that have been native to the area for millions of years. Check out this video for the weird biology behind their molting habits. And finally, using a UV light for finding opal. Some opal fluoresces under an ultraviolet light. Curiosity Mine is on Patreon. Patreon is a service that allows you to directly support your favourite creators to allow them to continue making the content that you enjoy. If you enjoy these videos and you think Curiosity Mine deserves your support, head on over to patreon.com/curiositymine for more information on how you can support this channel directly. If you do, you'll get your name on this list of amazing people who are supporting the channel already. So head to patreon.com/curiositymine or curiositymine.com/Patreon if you don't like the other one. But for now, let's get back to the aliens. There are a number of photographs in the book, including some great images of old mining equipment on display at Lightning Ridge and some photographs of opal and opalized fossils. The images are really wildly coloured, which might either be an artifact of the CMYK RGB conversion process for when you get a print manuscript converted to electronic ebook, or it could just be a design choice. I'm not sure, not my cup of tea. The cover art is apropos to the genre, with the opal UFO and the glowing opal alien dude at the bottom, although the images seem to be quite heavily compressed. I feel like this is a little bit unfair because this is a book about opalized aliens and human-looking alien collaborators and a whole bunch of things that are so far beyond fact-checking it's not even worth worrying about, so I'm not going to be too harsh on it for factual information. However, this is what I do, so I'm going to get my red pen out for a few minor things. I've already mentioned that a lot of the local stuff is very tourism focused. Most locals at Lightning Ridge don't really pay a lot of attention to the tourist attractions and the opal field tours and those sorts of things unless they work in the tourist industry. In fact, most locals don't visit tourist attractions at all, except maybe when they've got some family visiting from out of town or something. So there are a few moments where things can be a little bit cringy if you understand life at Lightning Ridge as intimately as a local would, but that's okay. I'm genuinely glad this book was written from the experiences of an author who visited Lightning Ridge and obviously enjoyed the place enough to incorporate it into one of his stories. Another minor quibble I have is the use, this is really fussy, the use of the word opals. The word opal is a little bit like the word fish or the word sheep. It's kind of both singular and plural at the same time. You have one opal, you have a lot of opal, you're on opal, you've found opal, you have some opal to sell, you have a bag of opal, you have a bucket of opal. If a specific number of pieces is involved, you might put the S on the end, so you might have 2 opals, I have 3 opals. It's actually pretty rare for an opal miner or an opal dealer to use the word opals, plural, with an S on the end when referring to bulk opal. And it almost always makes someone sound like an outsider when they do. Sentences like, "Have you found any opals?" are always a surefire sign that someone hasn't quite spent enough time on the opal fields yet. "Have you found any opal?" sounds much better. And my remaining gripe is also fairly minor, but it's the overuse of ratters as a narrative device. So ratters are opal thieves who enter into other opal miners' claims to steal opal directly from the walls of their mines. One of the first dramatic fictionalized accounts of opal mining at Lightning Ridge is Ian Idrias's Lightning Ridge from 1940. He was up all night coming up with that name. It includes the original Ratters story. In this video, I talked about a comic book from the 1940s that used that same story, pretty much lifted wholesale from Idrias, and there's numerous other stories that have recounted that same thing. There's also the Ratters of Lightning Ridge from 2005 by Richard W. Holmes. Obviously, another Ratters story, as you can tell from the title. I understand that theft and crime and heists are fun to write about, and a little bit of violence in your story. The Ratter makes a great villain character, but it's just kind of been done to death at this point. It's literally a literary trope and a cliche. At least in this story, it's a means to an end, and it's part of the discovery of something astonishing that advances the story, but it's still a little bit old hat. In real life, the word ratter has become a little bit cliche itself. It's not heard as often as maybe it used to be, although sadly that's not to say that crime on the opal fields is unheard of, it's just the word is kind of aged a bit. This book was published online in 2021, so it's only a few years old. I don't obviously have any statistics on how many copies of the ebook have been downloaded, but I feel it's a fairly niche market and probably appeals more to fans of that author than people interested in Lightning Ridge and opal. I don't know that it has much of a legacy so far, but I suspect it has a potential to be something of a cult success as time goes on, because that tends to be how things work in these genres. It's very silly, but it's a respectful and well-researched kind of silly. It tries much, much harder than you'd expect to do all the right things, and it achieves most of them. Lightning Ridge and opal have had a long history of unusual connections to the supernatural and the occult and the superstitious and the magical and the extraterrestrial. There have been many documented UFO sightings at Lightning Ridge over the decades. I'm guilty of seeing one myself back in 2005. Leave a comment below if you'd like to know more about that, because I'm not going down that rabbit hole without someone actually showing some interest. And then there's all of the myths and superstitions about opal being bad luck or being able to turn yourself invisible. And then there's science facts like opal fluorescence and the ongoing genuine scientific mysteries surrounding the formation of opal. Lightning Ridge is actually the perfect background for a science fiction story, and this one does it more than adequately. Plus, look, it's only 161 pages, so you'll knock it over in a couple of hours. $4 on Amazon. Go nuts. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to CuriosityMine on YouTube, and maybe even supporting the channel directly through Patreon. The link is in the description. And thank you for watching.